Hello, everyone. Today I want to share this webpage with you about communism. Dog culture reminds me of communism. Communism likes to take the wealth away from other people and give it to people that didn't necessarily earn it. And dog culture does this. If you don't own dogs and you don't want to deal with the barking and other negative externalities of dogs, you are supposed to give up your access to public property, shopping areas, schools, hospitals, television, movies, taking a walk around in the neighborhood, having a peaceful, quiet time at your home. All of those things that you have more of that dog owners don't have because of their dogs. Freedom of movement, extra money, spending habits. You are expected to give up all of those freedoms and allow dog owners to more and more take those away from you. Take away your freedom of movement, take away your peaceful exploration of your local parks and local shopping areas. Even the highways that you drive on are more and more full of dogs. Really reminds me of communism. So let's look at some of the tenets of communism. Limitation of private property through progressive taxation and heavy inheritance taxes. Well, inheritance tax, definitely. If you're born into a family that's full of dogs, um, that's where your money is going to go. That's where your time is going to go. They're not going to sit there and save money and save $7.50 a month into an account for you when you turn 18. They're going to be spending all that money on dogs. So there's an inheritance tax with dog ownership. It's taxing your parents. Limitation of private property through progressive taxation. Private property, too, I'm stretching the definition a little bit, but yeah, your access to property in general is reduced. And dog culture in general, dogs now are up in everyone's houses. It used to be like if you're going to own a big dog, you're supposed to have like property or a field or a use for that dog. Nowadays, it's like, no, you don't need a property. Just get one of these tiny apartments because the government goes out of the way to lift pit bull bans and force people to insure these apartments, which raises taxes as well. And so, yeah, the private property part, when people want to have dogs, it used to be like, well, how much property do you have? Nowadays, they just promote it as, oh, it's fine. Just get a tiny little apartment. You got 3 hound dogs and a Great Dane? No problem. How about gradual expropriation of landowners, industrialists, and railroad magnates? This kind of makes sense too because more and more and more, the transportation industry, transporting dogs across borders, transporting military dogs when they go somewhere else, it all has to be about transporting dogs and taking care of dogs. One of the ways that landowners get exploited with the dog culture, it varies from state to state, but if you want to do something on your land, you have to make sure that the taxes, the permits, the public watershed inspections, the sewer lines, the power, all of the fire risk, all of this stuff has to be perfect, or they can come take your property. They can tell you to take a shed down. If you're like wanting to live off grid and you build a certain type of shed that wasn't built on site, they can tax you, and you won't be able to be creative and do stuff like that without a bunch of government oversight. However, if you're a dog owner, you can set up a 501c3 tax shelter, put up all types of sheds, allow the dogs to piss and shit all over your property, bark and bother your neighbors. But a great example of this is look at Ginger Billy's channel. This is what he does with pit bulls on his property. So, and I'm not picking on him. That's just a good example that people can relate to. But if you want to have, for example, a whole bunch of dogs up on your property, they'll let you do it. But if you wanted to, say, start a business or have certain types of machines that made certain types of noise or possibly used certain types of oil or fluids, no, they wouldn't let you do it. And so yeah, the gradual expropriation of creative landowners and other type people, it's part of dog culture. So this next one's kind of long. Organization of labor or employment proletarians on publicly owned land in factories and workshops, with competition among the workers being abolished, and with the factory owners, insofar as they still exist, being obliged to pay the same high wages as they pay by the state. This kind of reminds me of the dog rescue situation. Veterinarians or people that own dogs, they're basically like employees of the state. You need to take care of these dogs the way that we say. If you don't, then we're going to hammer you. We're going to expose you. If you're a dog owner, a veterinarian, a rescue organization, they all have to take care of these dogs the same way. They all have to offer all of these services. And in a good example of this is veterinarian suicide. Like if you read some of their stories, they're supposed to treat all these dogs like they're kings and queens, yet the dog owners themselves don't. And they pay all of this money to go to school, and then their wages are low, or their wages are controlled by the industry of veterinarians or the shelters that they work for. There's actually a lot of deeper discussions of this part, so I'll leave that one alone for now. An equal obligation on all members of society to work until such time as private property has been completely abolished. This reminds me of dog culture too. It's like everyone is supposed to own a dog. Everyone is supposed to treat a dog the exact same way. Everybody is obligated to show some type of love for dogs. And as a dog owner, more and more you can only use your dog on public property. You know, a dog owner has a dog park. The dog owner gets to allow their dog to run all over the place. There's no private property about dog ownership. And then everybody else has to pay for that. Everybody has to work, and spend money and not create wealth. But more and more, they have to give up their access to property so that dogs can run around everywhere. How about centralization of money and credit in the hands of the state through a national bank with state capital and the suppression of all private banks? Now, again, I'm stretching the definition a little bit, but this is also like dog culture. Every dog owner is required to spend a portion of their money on dogs their entire life. The government knows what you're up to. They know what your future is if you own a dog. They've they've already pretty much said you're going to live and die and build no wealth. You're not going to leave any infrastructure. You're just going to spend all this money. You're going to give it to the government through ownership of the dog. And then the government, they'll go spend your money on stuff they think it needs to be spent on. But in the meantime, live your life, dump all this money into dogs. And that money really just goes to the government because more and more of these corporations that market all these dog products, the celebrities, the politicians with dogs in the White House, they are the ones that are putting dogs in your house so that they can have more and more access to your money. So, you know, it's the same type of thing going on. It's just via ownership of a dog. How about education of all children in national establishments at national cost? This is like kids that are born into families that own several dogs. You got 4 cane corsos up in your house. You got 4 hound dogs up in your house. You don't understand that you don't have to spend your money on these dogs. Like, wait till these kids are 18 and then ask them with all the financial things that they've learned, with all the human friends they have, do they want a dog? They're probably going to say no. But you're brainwashing and indoctrinating all these kids into thinking they need to own dogs, also thinking that dogs are better than them. If you watch some of these attack reaction videos, it'll show a kid with their face torn up or their little brother is in the hospital, and they will say stuff like, well, the dog was just being playful and we did this wrong and we did that wrong. And the parents will say the same thing. Oh, you know, our pit bull, our cane corso, he's just so playful that the kids were just playing with him and it just accidentally, you know, almost killed him. Gee golly. And so, yeah, the education of children is brainwashing them into thinking that they are inferior to dogs. This one we can really go deep into as well. How about destruction of all unhealthy and poorly built dwellings in urban districts? Well, who is going to decide that? A good example of this is the million dollar doggy rescue, doggy shelters, humane society places. They all are built on taxpayer money. Meanwhile, they will tear down statues, tear down historic buildings, and do other stuff like that. Push people into smaller and smaller apartments with more and more dogs, while they tear down what they say are going to be poorly built dwellings. And who's going to decide that? these dog loving people that want you up with more killer dogs in your house, they're going to decide this. And it's interesting too because dogs will tear up dwellings all the time. So this, I mean, this could be, in theory, kind of a good part of communism. Tearing down nasty houses. Like some of these houses that have a bunch of pit bulls, they're absolute danger zones of nasty broke down cars and fluids and oils and fire hazards. But they don't tear those down. They let those go and they let the dogs live there. So who is deciding what's healthy and unhealthy? Concentration of all means of transportation in the hands of the nation. This reminds me of dog culture too, because everywhere we go, more and more, it's like a lifted truck with 4 dogs hanging out. It's like a Prius that has a sticker that says "Save the Earth, lower emissions," and then they got like 5 corgis in the back window slobbering and splooging all over everything. Everywhere we go, transportation, transportation, kind of like I talked about up here. Transportation is set up for the transportation of dogs. They gotta go to the doggy daycare. They gotta go with us everywhere we go. People can't go to a family wedding without bringing their dogs and having them run around and tip cakes over. Every part of transportation is more and more needed for dogs. We're supposed to lower our emissions, but yet you see dogs all over the place. Dogs in jet planes going from state to state. Military dogs and their families. There's a whole military establishment set up to transport dogs. And all this stuff ends up falling under taxpayer dollars, or government organizations that at the end of the day everybody has to pay for. And that's communism. So those are some tenets of communism. Then they really remind me of dog culture. Dog culture is just an easy way to set yourself up to be locked into owning a dog and locked into being farther and farther away from your fellow humans. Dog ownership doesn't bring people together. I mean, it does, but it brings them together for violence. It brings them together to fight amongst each other. And all you got to do is take some time and pay attention and look at it. And look at another thing with communism that's I'm not showing on this webpage. The crazy marketing of communism, the propaganda. Like, it's so great. It's so great. All the famous Marxists and communists throughout history, it was advertised as like everything is going to be so perfect once you get communism. But it wasn't. And it's the same thing with dog culture. The advertising of it is just like how those old cigarette ads used to be. Like 9 out of 10 doctors smoke these type of cigarettes, all that type of stuff. One really good example of communism failing is when Russia had a bunch of car factories. It was all set up to do everything per the government specs. Like, for example, if you worked in a car factory and you noticed that the bearings on a certain machine were making a lot of noise and there's a different type of oil that could be used, and you brought that to your boss, the boss would say, "No, don't be creative. Just shut your mouth. Do it the way we say. We have a contract with that oil company for those bearings. If the bearings fail, just go and fix them, and that's it. You're not getting paid for overtime. Stop being creative." So communism de-incentivizes people to do better, to change, to improve. It's the same thing with dog culture. It de-incentivizes humans to do better amongst themselves. It's like, well, I got a divorce, I'll just get a dog, whatever. That's what the government said. The government said dogs are better. Well, I'm lonely. Instead of going and meeting my fellow humans and going back to church or starting up a hiking club, I'll just get a dog and sit on my ass and eat Cheetos and drink beer. That is very, very prevalent in the dog culture, and it creates this like subhuman standard. Just do it our way. Just get a dog. That's what the government and the marketing and the celebrities and the president said to do, because that's that good people. And so people just do it. It's like, oh, I'll just get a dog and then everything will be good. But in fact, you're killing your creativity and you're lowering your standard to own a dog, much like what happened in Russia when all of the car factories failed. Because everything was just this standard, that's it. Don't do better, don't improve. If you do, we're not even going to give you a voice. So, what do you guys think? Does dog culture sound like communism?